Hey everyone, Drew Dinkmeyer here at DailyRoto, bringing you a tutorial of not only our customizable projections, but the lineup optimizer that we've rolled out during the NFL season here over at DailyRoto.com. So let's walk you through. This is the landing page where if you come through our premium tools and you click on lineup optimizer, you will get this page, which includes all of our projections, which are still very much customizable. You have the power of projection at your own hands, and this is where you will start in terms of being able to generate your lineups. Now, you can always choose to just use our baseline projections for all of these different plays, but if you really want to craft your own projections or your own player pool, you're going to have to do a little bit of work in terms of generating that player pool list. So one way you can do that is you can use our customizable projections to input your opinions on top of our projections. So for example, there's lots of different customizable fields here, both on the team level and on the player level. Let's start on the team level. Let's say in this Carolina-Philadelphia game, you decide that you think Carolina, they have a team total of 24, but you really think they're going to score closer to 31 points in this game. You can move them to 31 points, and as you can see, I'll flip to Carolina here so it's a little bit easier to see. As you can see, Cam Newton becomes a much stronger value than if he was at 24 points. 31 points gets him projected for 23 DraftKings points. 24 gets him projected for 21 DraftKings points. So you can move the total. You can also move the number of plays. As you move the plays up, all of these different projections will move up because you're giving more opportunities to the players. As the plays move down, they'll all go back down, and so on and so forth. You can all do this with run-pass distribution as well. If you think they're going to be a pass-heavier game script, you just bump up their pass plays. If you think they're going to throw more inside the red zone, you pump up their pass touchdown percentage. And you can just go through there, and that'll keep moving around projections. Any of these changes you make on the team level will flow through to the individuals. But you can also make individual changes as well. And if you choose to just reset, you can always just hit the reset button and kind of go back here. But let's keep these changes for Carolina. We're actually not going to optimize through that slate, so it won't make a big difference. But they're there if you want to select and optimize through the Thursday slate. Let's say there's a specific wide receiver this week that you like more than our projections. And I'll use Deshaun Jackson as the example here. Now, you can see this little arrow. That means I've actually already made some edits to Deshaun Jackson, and because I've saved those edits, they keep coming back whenever I sign on to this screen. And I use these edits just for this demonstration. But if you want to go back to our baseline, you can see he's at 20 market share of targets and 22% of the passing touchdown market share as well. So if you wanted to up Deshaun Jackson's projection from this 12.43 points because you really want him in your GPP lineups, you want to focus on that upside instead of maybe this median projection, you would start to inflate the market share of targets, which I did before, to 25, the market share of touchdowns up to 26. Now the one thing to note is as I'm bumping his targets, watch not only his projection move 15.62 as I give him another target, he's at 16.42, but same thing with Jameis Winston. He goes from 19.46 to 19.59. So when you're doing edits on running backs and wide receivers mostly, but anything that you're editing in the receiving game will flow through to the quarterback because the quarterback is simply summing up all the yards of each of these individual plays. So if you're moving Deshaun Jackson up, you want to move Mike Evans down, let's say, or Cameron Brate or Adam Humphries, whoever. Or if you just don't want to worry about it, just don't have Jameis Winston in your player pool, exclude him from the player pool, and it really won't be a big deal in terms of making the lineups. So once you make all of your individual edits, and again, you can just keep going back and forth between these player edits, between our baselines, which in this case, the baseline would have the arrow pointing to the right. You're on the baseline. If it's pointing to the left, you're on an edit. So this is an edit, we're going back to the baseline, or this is the baseline, we're going forward to the edit. And those will take those changes right away so you can customize all your player projections. You can always save these different bumps with the save feature, and then every time you come back on your projection page during the course of the week, your projection edits will be saved. You can also export these bumps should you want to play around in Excel with something else. This export feature will generate an Excel CSV doc that you can pull and save on your own to work on your own if you're unable to access the site for some reason at work or whatever. From there, once we've made all of our customized player edits, we're just going to make a few for this one, But from there, you want to go and start the ability to optimize. So in the bottom right-hand corner is where you'll have all the instructions to walk you through the optimizer. And it says, hey, select a slate to optimize. So we go up to select slate here, and we can choose between DraftKings and FanDuel. We can choose the main slate. We can choose the Thursday through Monday, the early only, the afternoon only. On FanDuel, you've got Thursday through Monday. You've got their games of the week. You've got the main slate. And all of these slates will not only pull the player pool that's available to you for those slates to help you target your player pool, but they will also bring you the player IDs from the sites that allow you to upload your lineups into contests over there. So let's choose the DraftKings main slate. This will immediately eliminate the Philadelphia-Carolina game. You see that's no longer on the screen there. You see we're stopping at the Chargers-Oakland game. We don't have the Sunday night game or the Monday night game on DraftKings main slate. So from here, you see three icons emerge after you select the slate. You have a checkbox, you have a bullseye, and you have a lock. And these three are to help generate your player pool. Your player pool is ultimately what is going to be used to generate lineups. So let's go through each of these individually. The checkbox is simply an exclude feature. Now, it might seem a little silly because the check just means that they're included, but when you remove that check, it unhighlights the player and removes them from consideration for your player pool. So let's say you don't want Drew Brees this week, you think he's going to be too chalky. You simply uncheck him, and he's removed from the player pool. He can't be considered. Let's say you're going in the other direction. You really want Drew Brees this week. You want to make sure that he's in your player pool. You target him. You just hit that little bullseye. It removes the checkbox. It removes the lock. He is now targeted in your player pool for consideration. Let's say you want to go even a step further and you want to lock Drew Brees in all of your lineups. However many lineups you're going to generate, you want them all to be Drew Brees lineups. As soon as you hit that lock, you notice all the other quarterbacks, their targets and their locks disappear because you can only have one quarterback per lineup. So if you're locking a player, that means you want them in all of your lineups. With the running backs, you can do that with up to 3 because DraftKings has that flex that allows you to do that. With wide receivers, you can do it up to 4 and so on and so forth. But what I like to do is I like to go through each position and target the players that I want on that given week. So let's say I want some Drew Brees, I want some Kirk Cousins, I want some Deshaun Watson. And those are the 3 guys I have to have in my lineup pool. At the running back position, I'm going to go through. I'm going to say I need to have some Kareem Hunt this week. I think he's too cheap. I need some Lamar Miller. He's too cheap. I need some Mark Ingram. And then let's say, I know I want to create these lineups, but I don't want Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara together. So what I do is I will build lineups that don't have those two together by removing Alvin Kamara from consideration. That makes it so that all of my lineups will have Mark Ingram in consideration, and he's one of our best values on the week. If you sort by value, you'll see Mark Ingram at the very top, so he's going to generate and flood a lot of these different lineups. But I don't want him paired with Alvin Kamara. The two can't correlate well together, so I'd rather have them separate. So I'll make a set of lineups with Mark Ingram, and then I'll come back and I'll make a set of lineups with Alvin Kamara. Let's include Jerick McKinnon. Let's do the same with Chris Thompson and Samaje Perine. I don't want those two together, so I'll remove Samaje Perine from consideration. The other guys, whatever the lineup generator thinks in terms of the player pool, I'll let them select from there. Wide receiver, I'll do the same thing. I'll go through. I need to get my DeAndre Hopkins because I chose Deshaun Watson. I need my Michael Thomas because I chose Drew Brees, some Deshaun Jackson, and then let's make sure that I have some Jamison Crowder because I chose Kirk Cousins. Then let's go over to the tight end spot. Let's make sure I have some Jordan Reed because I chose Kirk Cousins. I don't want Travis Kelce yet because I'm just not sure if he's going to be healthy this week or he's in concussion protocol, so I don't want to build lineups with him just yet. I'll get some Austin Hooper in there. I like his upside. We'll go to the defenses. We'll choose Washington and Tampa and Atlanta and Baltimore. Those look like some good defenses this week. From there, once you have your player pool set in terms of the targets and the locks and the excludes, you go to Start Sim, which is here in the bottom right corner. This will bring you to a new page that looks a little bit funky at first, but we'll walk you through it. So the first thing that it's saying is, how many players do you want at each position? Now, these are the maximum numbers that we would like you to use at each position simply for speed and accuracy of the computation of the optimizer. So max 5 quarterbacks, 10 running backs, 15 wide receivers, an additional 10 flex players, 5 tight ends, and 5 defenses. I only chose those 3 quarterbacks, and if I leave this at 5, it'll choose 2 others for my player pool. But let's say I just want those 3 quarterbacks in all my lineups. I'm going to use 3 quarterbacks. Let's say I just want 6 running backs in all my lineups, and then I want more wide receivers. Now, this is going to give me heavier concentration on the running backs that I'm using, but I'm making that active decision. From there, this value tab is pretty interesting. What it's doing is it's saying at every position, do you want to focus on raw value or raw points? So this week at the quarterback position, most of my selections are higher scoring players. I'm going to reference wanting more of my lineups created with an emphasis on high points. I think there's a lot of value at the running back position this week, so I'm going to keep this more on the value side of the spectrum, emphasizing those value running backs that I chose. The wide receiver side, because I'm going with more value running backs, I want a little bit more emphasis on raw points at the wide receiver position. Same for defense this week. I chose one value defense in there with the Bucs, but I don't want tons of Bucs defense. I want to have more of the higher projected scorers. And then tight ends, I care a little bit more in the middle. Flex, I'm a little bit more in the middle. Salary floor, I'll move that up to $45,000, so all my lineups have at least a $45,000 salary floor. In reality, most of these lineups are going to be generated around $49,000 to $50,000, almost using all the cap, just because those are the ways the projections are going to optimize anyway. The second to last one is QB receiver stack depth, and this is basically an on-off toggle with do you want stacking. 0 would be no, I don't want stacking forced in all of my lineups. If it happens naturally because of the projections, it happens, but I don't want it forced. 1 would be yes, I want every quarterback lineup that I have used to be paired with a pass catcher. So my Kirk Cousins lineups will get either Jamison Crowder or Jordan Reed in them. Some will have both. My lineups with Deshaun Watson will get DeAndre Hopkins in them because I chose DeAndre Hopkins as my main pass catcher. Maybe Lamar Miller will flood into some as well because he's in my player pool. My Drew Brees lineups will have lots of Michael Thomas. They might also have Mark Ingram because he's in my player pool. And then the last decision is how many lineups do you want to make? You can go from 10 lineups to 15,000 lineups. The reason you might want to create tons and tons of lineups, like 15,000, is to give you a file that will allow you to create a representative sample of the lineups. It also gives you a little bit more ways to manage player ownership if you want. You can sort by the players' names and filter out the lineups, so you can get, if I want 20 lineups with this player and 20 with this and 20 with that, you can kind of go through that process. I'm just going to make 50 for this demonstration, and it takes me to 48. I'll just use my arrow to get right to 50. Okay, so I've got this set up where I'm going to emphasize points a little bit more than value at the quarterback, value a little bit more than points at the running back, definitely high scores at the wide receiver position. Tight end and flex, I'm going to be a little bit neutral, and defense, I'm going to emphasize the higher scores. If you go high scores on all of these, you might impact the ability to make the lineups because you need to create value somewhere. It also depends on the player pool that you set. The player pool that I happen to have set has a lot of value in it, so probably won't be a problem regardless. The next step will take me to what the player pool looks like. So these are the players that are under consideration for my lineups this week. You see the quarterbacks, Drew Brees, Deshaun Watson, Kirk Cousins. Then it goes through the running backs, some of which I targeted, Mark Ingram and Lamar Miller and Jerick McKinnon and Kareem Hunt, some of which I did not target, like Chris Thompson and Devontae Freeman, but they were the top projected values that were left, and since I emphasized value, it picked up the values. At the wide receiver position, since I emphasized raw points, I'm getting more like Antonio Brown and Julio Jones and some of these higher point scorers here. Now, if there's somebody that you find in this player pool that you don't like, let's say I really don't want Jarvis Landry, I'll just go back, and I'll go back all the way to my player pool, and I'll find Jarvis Landry, and I'll exclude him. And then I'll start the sim again, and it saves all those features that I set up. I'll go next step. And now I create a player pool that does not have Jarvis Landry. In it comes Mike Evans and Stephon Diggs and Larry Fitzgerald and so on and so forth. So from there, I now have this player pool. And again, you can keep going back and forth to make sure the player pool is exactly the way you want it. You can target players more specifically if you want to make sure that you're crafting the players that you want in that pool. And from there, I can generate lineups. So in this bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the button to generate lines. I click on that. It takes me back to this page, and if you're not paying attention with this bottom right corner, you might be a little bit confused. But it says, processing, do not leave this page. So what it's doing now is it's creating all of these lineups for me. The 50 lineups that I chose, it is working on the creation. So I just wait a little bit, show a little bit of patience, and it'll give me the lineups. And there they are. Download lines brings me to a CSV file that pops up, and I can open that up. And it gives me access to all of my lineups. And if I expand this out, you can see what the lineups look like. All of my QBs are paired with a pass catcher. So I've got Michael Thomas on these Drew Brees teams. I've got Jordan Reed on these Kirk Cousins teams. I've got Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins paired up. It gives you the projection of each one of these lineups based on the projections that we have, along with whatever you've customized. And it gave me 50 lineups, you can see here, going from 2 to 51. It gives me the player IDs, which I can load into DraftKings right away. And then over on the right, it gives you your ownership. So for Mark Ingram, he was our highest projected value on this slate. I've got him in 100% of my lineups. Every single lineup has Mark Ingram in it here, and a lot of them have him in the flex. With these Drew Brees lineups, so it's Mark Ingram, Drew Brees, and Michael Thomas in a triple stack. A lot of them have Michael Thomas and Lamar Miller and DeAndre Hopkins. And what it's doing with these lineups is it's showing you the own percentage. Now, if you want to try to manage this ownership percentage a little bit better, one of the things that you can do in the player pool is customize the projections so players' projections look a little bit more similar. And when they look a little bit more similar, it'll spread out this ownership a little bit more. We are going to add in tools that allow you to manage ownership a little bit better. That's on our development path. When we do that, you'll be able to set some boundaries on how much exposure you want to individual players, and that'll help manage out the pool as well. But this created 50 lineups for me really quickly. These are obviously 50 lineups that include Mark Ingram. If I wanted to create tons and tons more lineups, like 15,000, I would get a little bit less Mark Ingram. I wouldn't get quite 100%. He'd probably drop down into the 70s, 80s, and it would give me a little bit more of a representative sample that I could choose from. If I wanted to then make lineups with Alvin Kamara instead of Mark Ingram, I can just go back and edit my player pool. But this is a good example of how you can generate lineups pretty quickly on the site with the optimizer, and also customize the pool and projections. So I'm going to exit out of this. If I wanted to save this, I can obviously save this to my desktop, and then I can upload onto DraftKings later. This is another file I had created earlier, and I go right back here. Now, if you want to just start over again, you just hit the reset button, and that'll take you right back to the home page of the lineup optimizer, where you've got all the player baselines set. You've got the slate to select, and so on and so forth. And you can keep playing with this throughout the course of the week to generate all sorts of different lineups that you're looking for to be able to use on DraftKings or FanDuel every single week. So hopefully this tutorial brings you a little bit more guidance on how to use the optimizer, all of the tools that are available to you through customizable projections, through being able to save your edits, through being able to toggle back and forth between edits and baselines to check things, and also a little bit more command of your player pool through the exclude, the target, and the lock buttons. So that's it for this week's tutorial on the customizable projections and the lineup optimizer. For those of you who have already subscribed to DailyRoto's premium NFL content for the season, I hope this is very helpful for you guys in terms of being able to better use the optimizer and save your time. For those who are considering purchasing a package and joining the team over at DailyRoto and the premium projections and the premium content and our premium Slack chat and all those different stuff that comes with the premium content, you can go over to dailyroto.com, click on the Go Premium button, toggle over to NFL, and you can buy a package to get in on the game with us. So best of luck the rest of this DFS season to all those listening out there, and thanks for the time today.